Joseph Stanislaw, aka Jersey Joe, joined me on an epic two-part crossover as we look at the FanDuel betting lines, reflect on this past season for the Devils, their offseason, the draft, and much more. There's a lot to break down with Jersey Joe of DraftPro Hockey and Pucks and Pitchforks. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Joining me on today's episode is a writer over at DraftPro Hockey and also Pucks and Pitchforks, my colleague and recurring guest on this show, Jersey Joe, a.k.a. Joseph Stanislaw. Jersey Joe, I told you before the recording, I am more than ready to make this a two-parter episode because we have a lot of ground to cover. But before we get into all that, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, when the draft happened on the first day, I was kind of writing off a little bit on Anton Celaya because I was projecting for him to go before number 10, but I did have him as a want for the Devils to get at 10, so I'm not going to lie about that, but I was very ecstatic when they selected him. So for me, having watched him and the Devils pick him, to me, says a lot about the next two seasons for him, developing better in the KHL under former Devil and USSR star player and Igor Larionov. So I'm very made that choice. And also, remember last year I mentioned a ideal draftee in Chase Cheslock to be a New Jersey Devil.
Yes.
Well, not only did he become a Devil, who else did I say recently? I sent you a clip of from our last crossover. It was a goalie, but
well, let's see. I was trying to fight through the wind turbine the last time you came on this show, but in all seriousness, you picked the number one ranked goalie in North America who last played for the Omaha Lancers, and it had to come at the expense of John Marino because I was there live when the Devils first made that trade in Vegas. But you went on a limb and said Mikhail Yegorov.
So one of the things I will tell you, when I was scouting him, I'll say this for people who didn't watch the other episode. When I was watching him on a crap team on defense, he was the only reason why they were staying competitive in those games. And when you have a goalie that he was actually, from what I was listening on draft day, that he actually was using virtual reality goggles to improve his positioning throughout the season. So I talked to my nephew via my stepmom's marriage, and my nephew Joey said to me, back in our day, this is the 2016 draft class, goes, we were just playing with a tennis ball against the wall, just trying to work on our reflexes as skaters and goalies. But nowadays, everyone's got it pretty good. So when you get these new kids using new technology, this is making them sharper and more precise. And back to Yegorov, he's going to play another year with the USHL, but I wouldn't be surprised if he played a couple seasons at BU and decides to go to New Jersey.
So I think Tom Fitzgerald knew what he was going to do because, like I said, the Devils did trade away John Marino to the Utah Hockey Club to get that second-round pick because originally they didn't have any second-round picks. And I was at the Sphere in Vegas covering the draft, and I was trying to meet up with the guys over at Locked On Senators. So I was in the crowd. I wasn't in the media area at the time. And when I heard that goal horn notify everyone that a trade had been announced and that the Devils logo came up, I was like, oh, you have got to be kidding me. And I'm like, okay, who did they give up? And lo and behold, it's revealed that John Marino is heading to Utah, and they use that to select Yegorov from the Omaha Lancers. And I think Fitzy knew that he was going to part ways with Akira Schmid, because later on in the day, Schmid and also Holtz are heading off to the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for Paul Cotter. And now you have another goalie who was the number 1 ranked goalie in North America going into the draft. Now you have another goalie to develop to sort of take the place of Akira Schmid. Now you got Markstrom, you got Allen, Nico Dawes is still in the system, and now you get Yegorov.
Also, you still have Tyler Brennan. You also have Isaac Poulter. So you got some guys who are stopgaps in between. And I always tell people, not just you, but, everyday people like Matt Junio and whoever out there, I always say to them, when you get a guy like a Markstrom, it's not for the long term. It's there for the near term to develop the next 2 seasons. And when you have that guy and you have a Jake Allen, those guys are stopgaps. Those guys are meant to help the guys like a Nico Dawes and Isaac Poulter and a Tyler Brennan to develop the next 2 seasons. And after that, the next contract that Fitzy extends does affect the guys behind in the development of the goalies. So that does play into the near and the long term, especially when you're trying to build a successor or successors in that playoff window. So Nico Dawes to me is in that period of growth near in the AHL, but he's going to end up in the NHL, and he's eventually going to take the. I really like what Bearclaws Dawes has done. Maybe not from last season, but in prior seasons when during COVID, he stood tall against a team like the Bruins, and he just was using his size. With the defense that they have now, I mentioned this article that was just posted. Devils got bigger. They got physical. They're a hybrid now. It's not like all physicality and no flair for the dramatic. They got a little bit more of a blend.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about that in a second. We're also going to look at the betting lines. But before we continue, Jersey Joe, I don't think I've ever done a live read with you. And what better way to talk about the lines if we didn't discuss FanDuel? I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. You want to finish my sentence, Jersey Joe? Visit FanDuel.com to look at the odds. But please remember
to bet responsibly. I mean
Absolutely.
it, people. Don't be doing crazy things that have been going on in other sports. And I'm not saying names, but I did see someone who bet irresponsible on social media, and that was not a good idea.
It's not a good idea. Gamble responsibly, people.
It's not investing, I'm telling you. But anyways, back to odds. If you look at FanDuel, per VegasInsider.com, the New Jersey Devils are given a plus 1,100 in the 2024-2025 Stanley Cup playoff odds to win the Stanley Cup. Now, who's number one favored? The Edmonton Oilers at plus 850. Runner-up, Florida Panthers.
I feel like that's just a little lazy because it's really hard to to win a championship back-to-back in any sport, let alone the same two teams go back there. I think the last example in which we've seen a team go back-to-back and face their same opponent is out in the NBA when the Cleveland Cavaliers had that battle with the Golden State Warriors for many years in the NBA Finals. You don't really see that too often where it's the same two teams going back to the finals back-to-back.
I will always tell people, whether they're a diehard hockey fan, casual or new, I always tell them you have 82 games. Then you have 16 games to try and win Lord Stanley's Cup. Now, you have to win those 16 games out of the best of 7. That's not easy. Just think about how tough it is to go up against a team like the Oilers or even the Florida Panthers, for that matter. The Panthers were just like Sasquatching their way. They were throwing teams like down to the boards. A lot of GMs are starting to copycat the Panthers, and the Devils started, getting bigger in the draft through that. And they realized that they can't just have all size being smaller than 6 feet, and they can't just have guys who are, should I say, softer defensively. They need guys who are more cutthroat defensively. So I want to actually add on to that. Our boss Nick Villano actually put out an article a few weeks ago during the Stanley Cup Final, and he said that the Devils could learn a thing or two from the Panthers. And remember, this was prior to free agency. This was during the Stanley Cup Final matchup when the Panthers were taking on the Oilers. And I actually talked about it on this show. I said, look at the Panthers. Collectively, they're a better team. Now, the Oilers might have big-name players like Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, 2 former MVP winners. You got Zach Hyman, 50-goal scorer, Evan Bouchard, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, you name it. The Panthers were just collectively the better team, but the Oilers, I would say, sold more tickets in terms of popularity. That's why they were talked more about through ESPN compared to the Panthers. But if we look at Florida, Matthew Tkachuk, someday he can possibly win the Hart Trophy. Sam Reinhart, he led the team in points. Sasha Barkov, one of the better two-way players in the entire league. Sergei Bobrovsky, former Vezina Trophy winner. Carter Verhaeghe, Evan Rodriguez, solid contributors. Aaron Ekblad, he's been there for a long period of time, and I think he's one of the more underrated defensemen in the entire league. The former first overall pick for the Panthers, he's seen things through thick and thin. I think the Devils can learn a thing or two because the players I just listed, there's some relatable players on the Devils roster. Jack Hughes could someday win the Hart. Nico Hischier, one of the better two-way players. And like I said, Sasha Barkov, he just won the Selke Trophy. And that's his second time winning it, if my memory serves me well? Let me check that whole sec. Let me look up Selke Trophy.
Aaron Ekblad.
So anyways,
Dougie Hamilton, a little bit underrated, but still a very good contributor. And Carter Verhaeghe, Evan Rodriguez, they are solid contributors, and the Devils have a lot of solid contributors now. And Sam Reinhart, when you think of the Florida Panthers, I think you think of Matthew Tkachuk as the best player, but Reinhart led the team in points. And who led the Devils in points this past season? Jesper Bratt. But when you think of the Devils, you don't think of Jesper Bratt as the best player unless you're the Bratt Pack. Just a little joke. I just want to make something perfectly clear. The Bratt Pack, that's my guy. I have nothing against him. Just a little bit of a joke. Great guy.
Jack Hughes, if it weren't for his injuries, he probably would beat the Bratt at his own game in point production. But, that's another thing for another day. Now, when it comes to the Devils getting bigger all on 4 lines, I had to bring this up. I looked at Daily Faceoff the other day when I was making my article. I looked at the Bastian, Lazar, and Cotter line. I'm calling that the Sasquatch 4th line because you look at what they've done. as a collective from the past season. Not just playing on the same team. I'm just saying combined total. You take what they did as a collective, like 233 of those 555 hits are actually from Paul Cotter. Now you add in Lazar and you add in Bastian. That's 555 hits in 201 games. And I was telling my nephew, Joey, I said, that equals 2.76 hits per game on that one line if those players play together for that amount of time. So just imagine whether the New York Rangers, Edmonton Oilers, San Jose Sharks go up against the Devils' fourth line. Think about how hard Sheldon Keefe's opponents are going to have it when he sends them in just on full-out attack mode. Like, just imagine what other teams on the defensive zone are going to feel, the big brunt of that force. And think about if you're Shimon Nemeth or even Brendan Dillon, you take a nice pass and you take a shot on net. Imagine if one of your three guys is up in the crease or around the crease and tips that puck in. That could be a 2-point lead, a 3-point lead, a 4-point lead, whatever. Devils would have an easier time winning out of those 164 points outstanding. I wouldn't be surprised if this team goes north of that 81-point mark from last year and averages 102 points. My ceiling is 114.
Really?
I'm telling you why. First off, take the 112 points from the season before that. Take 81. What you get? Plus you add my hypothetical 14 divided by 3. That's about 103 points.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my law of average. And if that team can underperform at 81, imagine what they can do north of 81 points with this current roster, with the defense in front of what we have in goal and up front on offense. And adding a guy like Paul Cotter on the third, fourth line, adding speed, tenacity, physicality, makes it easier for your third, fourth line players to get open, create chaos, and your offensive and defensive defensemen. Not to mention, you have guys on the top pairings like Brett Pesce, who can do a really good job at coming up clutch on offense, takes pressure off Dougie Hamilton, takes pressure off Luke Hughes, and Lord knows if Jonathan Kovacevic steps in enough offensively, but defensively, you're buying time and space for your guys up front, so that way that defensive core can come up and pinch properly and let your goalie breathe more and take in less shots.
Well, I'm going to actually challenge you a little bit. So according to the FanDuel betting lines, team to record 100-plus regular season points, the Devils have the odds at minus 175, meaning if you were to bet $5, you're only going to win $2.86. However, if you want to take the risk a little higher, if you want to up the ante, team to record 110-plus points, Devils odds plus 210. Meaning, if you were to bet $5, you can win $10.50. I'm just trying to be safe here. Like I said, gamble responsibly. Let's up the ante a little bit. Do you think this Devils team can record 110-plus points?
I believe they have the necessary tools to do it. The thing is, I mentioned, is that they're not a very old team. They're still a young team, but they're not so young that they're very inexperienced or anything like that. But you got a lot of guys who are more physical. You got guys who are more so in shape. You got a lot of veterans to youngsters. And it allows those guys to be more protected in a way. So, like, if Luke Hughes gets hit by a Matt Rempe, you have a guy like, let's say, Brett Pesce, who can jump in and be like, listen, bleep, bleep, you're not touching him anymore. Good bleeping bye. Get away, or else I'll kick you around. And
My
I'm
bet
gonna tell
is
you,
Brendan Dillon. I think Brendan Dillon would probably do something like that. Brendan Dillon is more
Brendan Dillon would be the
physical.
first. Brendan Dillon is going to be the first guy to go after any player, like a big man or Sasquatch going after a rotisserie chicken.
It
I'm
reminds me
telling
of that reel. Yeah, it reminds me of that reel you sent to me yesterday.
Yeah, I couldn't help it, and I just said this is going to be a perfect analogy because the Devils are going to be like a Sasquatch going after rotisserie chicken all season long, and everyone's going to be the rotisserie chicken wishing they weren't near a Sasquatch. So,
Speaking
Brendan
of which,
Dillon,
I need to find a Boston Market near me. I need to because now you got me thinking.
Or
of
Costco.
rotisserie chicken. I prefer Boston Market.
They used to be around in Jersey.
Yeah, not
But
so much
I grew up
anymore.
on it.
I don't see Boston Market that often anymore. Is it going out of business? I don't know. But anyway, I'm sorry. Back to what you were saying.
But anyways, what I'm saying is that the Devils gotten a lot bigger, a lot stronger, more physical. Now, you look at a guy like Brendan Dillon. He was about, 12th in the league last year with 241 hits. And also, he's had some very good fights recently. And he's the type of guy that is like, you think you're gonna mess with him first. And a lot of fans, even though he's a little bit closer to my age, he's still like very good in tip-top shape. So I will say, fans who want that Neanderthal hockey, that Sasquatch hockey that I always talk about, he's that prime example on defense. And for those who want to see more clutch offensive scoring on defense, a good tutor for Shimon Nemeth is Brett Pesce. Why? He does block a lot of shots. He doesn't do as many hits, but he's a very well-positioned player, even though he's not the fastest of skaters, but he's a good skater. And it's a good segue for Shimon Nemeth to learn from, because the next how many years out of that contract, Shimon Nemeth has a really good mentor and a coach for life that sets him up. And Nemeth looks back to himself and says, I am very glad that Tom Fitzgerald brought in this amazing veteran, and I'm forever grateful for, all these lessons I learned. They're, things that are very hard to put, a value on. And so it's important. When I talked to you last year, I wish they didn't take away Graves and Severson altogether.
They kind of had to. They didn't have a choice because both of them were going to get paid in a weak free agent market. I've talked about it religiously on this show. If Tom Fitzgerald wanted to keep both of them or had the choice to keep them, he would have done so. But the problem is Severson got paid big time. Graves got paid big time. Graves signed a 6-year deal. Severson's contract, I forget what it was, but it was a lengthy sign-in trade with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Keep in mind, Jesper Bratt needed a new contract. Timo Meier needed a new contract. Those were the main areas of focus for Tom Fitzgerald at the time. And he couldn't hold on to Graves or Severson. And now, fast forward to the 2023-2024 season, the Devils' blue line, very inexperienced, with Shimon Nemeth playing in more games than he was supposed to play in. Luke Hughes, Dougie Hamilton going down with an injury, missing about 75% of the season. Jonas Siegenthaler, he had his fair share of injuries. The Devils' blue line was just very inexperienced. And I know you love Kevin Ball, but he's still relatively young. Santeri Hatakka, also relatively young. That's the thing, which is the Devils' blue line did get less experience, but you couldn't hold on to Severson or Graves because they were going to get paid big time. Severson, a bottom 4 defenseman with the Devils in his final season with New Jersey, now a top 4 defenseman with a rebuilding Blue Jackets team. Before we continue today's discussion, let me tell you guys about Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. I've actually used Indeed before to book myself some play-by-play gigs. I highly recommend it. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree. Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And listeners of the show could get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support my show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, let's get back to today's episode with Jersey Joe of DraftPro Hockey. Take it away once again.
One of the things I always say is that when you have all these really good players in your farm system, like in the AHL and whatnot, it's better to have some veterans around where those guys can cook a little bit longer and not have to feel rushed. Like there's always a timeline and a place to hit that prime and be like, I need to be an NHLer now, and I need to prove myself ASAP. This, with the way the Devils are set, like for me as a scout, from an amateur perspective, looking at the NHL perspective, it's important that guys like Nemeth and Luke Hughes learn to become more like veterans rather than play and be treated like rookies. Because you have a guy like a Sheldon Keefe who's not had those kind of players, but he's got really good defensemen. Like I mentioned, Dylan and Pesci, and you have Dougie Hamilton there. This is going to be probably the best D-core he's ever had in his NHL tenure outside of Toronto. And maybe with Toronto, this is probably his best that he's ever had to deal with defense core. But offensively, maybe not the most high octane, but the most powerful and physical that can create a strong forecheck.
Well, I disagree with you to an extent. I'm sure Luke Hughes and Shimon Nemeth, they want to be treated like veterans, but physically and mentally, they're not there. And I spoke to Chico Resch about that. How can you give both those players 5+ years experience in the NHL? You can't. It's a process. And unfortunately, Luke Hughes, he performed well towards the end of the 2022-2023 season, and he basically kicked Ryan Graves out of town because he performed really well during the playoffs when Lindy Ruff inserted him round 2 against the Hurricanes. And for Nemeth, Tom Fitzgerald admitted that he was only supposed to play in about 10 games, not the amount of games he ended up playing in, because I think he was only scratched for 1 game, because I think he made his debut. I was there. I think he made his debut, against the Kraken in December, if my memory serves me well.
Hold on a second. You're talking about this past season or the season before?
No. Nemeth. Nemeth recorded his first point against the Kraken. I got
I was present for. I remember he came up against the Kraken, but I also remember I was present at the game where he scored that seeing eye shot against Chicago when Brendan Smith lined up Connor Bedard. So I was at that game. I remember that perfectly.
Yeah, and going back to what else you were saying it's not a high-octane offense in terms of deep defensive core, that I also disagree, because Dougie Hamilton, he's coming back. One of the best offensive-minded defensemen in the entire league. Luke Hughes, Shimon Nemeth, all 3 of those players are going to focus on offense. That's just their game. That's their bread and butter.
So here's where I'm coming from with that. Remember, This is more balanced, where you have Brendan Dillon. He's not going to be like bomb a shot in. He's going to be pass the puck, get in, play physical, toe the line, and then you're going to have someone like Dougie who's more focused on putting pucks on net and trying to create that chaos on net and try and get as many guys up front. then Luke Hughes is not going to be a defensive wizard by all means. He's going to be the guy he's going to play like a fullback, running back in college football. He's going to carry that puck right up ice, and he's going to pass it or maybe shoot it on net to whoever's there. But the thing is, he passes too much when his brother's on the ice. And I hate to play coach. They should never play on the same ice together. They need to play separately because Luke is good playing with guys who are more snipers. Like, you got to have guys that shoot more than guys that pass more, especially on the power play. That drives me nuts.
Well, yeah, on the power play, I will admit, Luke Hughes, he doesn't intimidate anyone with this slap shot, but he has to develop it a little bit more. That's why the Devils power play went down when Dougie Hamilton went down. But right. I also disagree with you. I get it. Luke Hughes likes to pass it to his brother, and Jack is a wizard with the puck. But they had great chemistry, that's the brother connection. But the thing is like when Jack was out there, I think Luke's assist numbers went up and his efficiency also went up. I would have to look at the advanced analytics to show that. But just based on what I saw from an optics standpoint, I think Jack brought the best in Luke. And honestly, Luke's passing is something I'm not going to complain about because he's not a shooter. That's right. Just the reality. He needs to develop that a little bit more. Luke is a great passer. Dougie Hamilton, better shooter. Luke, I like his passing, and I think he should stick with that until he develops a little bit more muscle on his shot.
And he can be a bit like a power forward at times when he barrels in from all the way from the defensive zone all the way to the offensive zone entries. He's really good at that. Now, he's just got to keep adding on more muscle. His brother needs to add more muscle because
– feels like we've been I don't know if it's going to happen or not. We've been having this discussion for the past – when was Jack drafted?
2018, I think.
2019? Somewhere around that time, first overall. We've been having this discussion for 4 or 5 years, and hasn't really happened yet.
You got to hit the gym, buddy. You got to hit the gym.
Well, he does, because unfortunately, if Jack doesn't gain some more muscle, he's going to get maneuvered off the puck more often. And remember, the Devils are no longer an underdog team. Opponents are going to be gunning for him.
Exactly. And
Nico. That's why you add people like Cotter, Nason, another player that we need to talk more about, and Dylan, Pesci, Kovacevic, whomever. That's why you add more physicality and size to this roster.
And I always tell people, like, you look at guys like Stefan Nason over the years, they get the job done. They do the small things right. And they are the guys that go to the crease, dirty areas, fetch the puck. And guys like Stefan Nason get over 110-plus hits a season. And the way he plays, he has an electric game. And he may not score the sexiest goals or the most, amazing assists, but he comes up clutch like no time on a third or even second line at once in a while, but more of a third, fourth line guy. But he brings a special chemistry come playoff time. And when guys like Palat don't deliver, he's there to deliver. And you need guys like that who are going to challenge teams like the Rangers, the Islanders, the Hurricanes, the Islanders. I mean, yeah, they're trying to get good, but, it's so-so when they kind of change their team a little bit. But the Rangers are still, to me, the big dog that the Devils have to take on.
But the Devils did defeat the Rangers last year in the playoffs, but I guess people
a few seasons ago.
Yeah, a few seasons ago. But 2023, I guess.
Yep.
Wow. It's hard to believe, I can't even say last season now, because technically last season was the 2023-2024 season. And we're going to have to leave it there, but don't worry, part 2 will be here before you know it, as Jersey Joe and I will continue our discussion. But to close out today's episode, like I do with every episode, continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode alongside with Jersey Joe to continue our discussion regarding this past season, offseason, and more for the New Jersey Devils. Thanks for listening once again.